Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
It's Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026, and I'm Candace Kelly, sitting in for Roland. Here's what's coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Virginia voters have approved a new congressional district map that may enhance Democrats' electoral prospects in November. MAGA supporters are claiming the election was rigged. We'll discuss why this represents a victory for democracy. And a Virginia activist will explain why ISIS planned to convert a vacant 9,000 square foot building in Suffolk into office space is a major problem. Meanwhile, today is Earth Day. We're going to speak with the executive director of the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice about alternative approaches to environmental justice, especially in light of the Trump administration's rollbacks of critical initiatives. And we will continue addressing the epidemic of fatal domestic violence by exploring the underlying issues that contribute to these tragedies. Tonight, we're focusing on how to escape violent situations and what healing looks like for survivors. We'll also discuss domestic violence and the law, including temporary restraining orders and the potential charges and sentences for offenders. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
All right, Tuesday, Virginia voters approved a map that gives Democrats the chance to net as many as 4 U.S. House seats. The approval means that the lawmakers will temporarily adopt a new map, which is poised to benefit Democrats' national ambitions during the midterm election year. The measure passed with a 51.5% of the vote. Here's what Virginia House Speaker Don Scott and Virginia Senate President pro tempore Louis Lucas had to say about what they are calling a victory.
Yesterday was a victory. But for me, this was personal because I remember exactly where this started. I watched what was happening in Texas, Republican legislators blocked by Donald Trump and MAGA extremists trying to rig the system before voters ever had a chance to speak. And I watched those Texas legislators take a stand, even leaving their state to stop that power grab. I stood with them. Because what was happening in Texas wasn't just about Texas, it was about the rest of the country. And I said right then and right there, clearly, if they start this fight, Virginia is going to finish it. We took this question to the people, not behind closed doors, not politicians, to the people. And in a special election, One question, no candidates, millions spent trying to confuse voters. Virginians still showed up in strong numbers with clear purpose, and they voted yes. Now let's be honest, this was not an easy fight. This was a marathon to get to this point. There was a lot of misinformation, a lot of noise, a lot of efforts to confuse communities, especially the black voters and working families, to which I took strong offense, because being a civil rights advocate, I've seen this before. But those same communities showed up anyway. They showed up informed, they showed up focused, and they showed up ready. Now, this 10-1 map, yes, 10, I won't say it, 1 is about leaving, is about leveling the playing field for the country. We were not going to let anyone tilt the system without a response. We were going to meet this moment, and we were going to act. And yesterday we did. And let's be clear, this goes beyond Virginia. And what started in Texas didn't stay in Texas. And what started here will not stay here either. Virginia sent a message. If you try to rig the system, we fight back. If you try to take power from voters, we will take it right back. I meant it when I said Virginia will finish the fight, and yesterday we did. And I think
the motto of Virginia is sic semper tyrannis, thus always the tyrants. I think we changed it last night. I think it's all we do is win, 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 no matter what. Because we won again. We won in 2025, and we won by a large margin. And then we kicked ass again last night. I think Donald Trump and MAGA is watching us right now. If they didn't know us, they know us now. And I had the pleasure of his former campaign manager, I think his name is Chris Lasavita or something like that. He retweeted me and said, something about Don Scott. And I said, I know you're mad, because we just winning. And so I would be mad too. But you don't send the junior varsity out when you got the varsity on the field. You send out the big players, and he should have came out and played with us. So last night, Virginia lived up to its billing of thus always the tyrants. We stand up. We had enough of Trump's chaos, enough of his power grabs, enough of him sending our girls, our men and women in the military to a stupid war. He said no more stupid wars. Well, he's low IQ. This is a stupid war. We have no idea why he went. We have no idea why when he's leaving. He doesn't know. Every day he tweets out a different reason on what's happening. And every person who's ever been in the military has war gamed the Persian Gulf. And every single time the Iranians shut down the Strait of Hormuz. And now he said, I didn't know they were going to do this. Well, what the hell not? Because every person in the military who's ever studied that area knows this. And so Virginia said, enough. We are a state that has a huge military presence. And we came out yesterday. Now, we know there are going to be folks who said, hey, this was a close election. But I think Virginians chose fairness over fear. They chose truth over the misinformation, and democracy over political gains. And they spent a lot of energy trying to trick black voters. But who showed up? Who made it happen last night? Black voters showed up. Hispanic voters showed up. Communities that Republicans tried to mislead, that they targeted to mislead and suppress, showed up and made their voices heard. And guess what? They not only voted yes, but they voted hell yes. Republicans poured tens of millions of dollars, almost $40 million into this race. Much of it in the final weeks, flooding the airwaves with misinformation, targeting our communities and trying to confuse voters. And they still lost. If you spend that kind of money and lose, that's not a close call. It's a rejection. Everybody's talking about, this was never about the maps or anything like that. This is about standing up to MAGA and Donald Trump. That's what the referendum was on. It was a referendum on, do you want to continue to see your gas prices go up to $4 and $5 a gallon? Do you want to see houses unaffordable? Do you want to get grocery prices over the top? Or do you want to bring some stability back to America? That's what the election was about last night. And it was a rejection of its message, a rejection of MAGA's tactics, and it's a rejection of all of the things they stand for. And by the way, release the damn Epstein files. They campaign on fairness, but the moment voters rejected them, moments after they lost last night, the first thing they said is, oh, we don't want fair no more. We want to go court. First thing they do when they can't win an election, now they're trying to undo it, and they're running to the courthouse for a frivolous, politically motivated attempt to overturn the will of the voters. The last thing Republicans want to see in Virginia is a voter. But let me say this clearly. In Virginia, we respect the will of the voters. In Virginia, we don't do kings. In Virginia, the power belongs to the people. Sic semper tyrannis. Last night, Virginia stood up. Virginia fought back, and once again, Virginia led the way for our democracy.
And he even threw in the Epstein files. How about that? Well, listen, right now, we are joined by Nadine Smith. She is president and CEO of Color of Change. She's here to explain how Black voters played a decisive role in defeating a coordinated billionaire-backed disinformation campaign in Virginia and in approving a redistricting referendum aimed at protecting fair representation. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. This is a phenomenal day. I know Virginians are celebrating, but people all over the country are celebrating because it absolutely was a repudiation of Trump, of the Epstein-Trump war, of the entire cadre of billionaires that surround Trump, profit from him, and thought they could steamroll this disinformation campaign through Virginia. And it has been a beautiful thing to watch Virginians see right through it and show up and shut it down.
Yeah, obviously a victory for Democrats, but how do you translate the immediate, tangible power that we will see from this election? What does that look like?
Well, I think one of the really important things that everybody's got to tune into right now is the role of disinformation fueled by billionaires who have access to, the ability to pour money in. And they believe that that's all it takes. But people were savvy enough to see through those mailers that came to their home, trying to use Klan imagery to trick them into a no vote. And so I think it's not an accident that Donald Trump was telling everybody, telling his closest donors, telling his closest political allies, that if this didn't go his way in Virginia, that, they should be shaking in their boots, and they should be, because what it says is our voters are getting much more sophisticated. I don't think of this as a win for Democrats. I think of this as a win for democracy, because we've got to push back against the idea that whoever has the most money, whoever can invest most deeply in misinformation and disinformation, who can pull the kind of dirty tricks we saw when Joe Biden's voice was used for robocalls in 2024, these kind of mailers, they have a flood the zone and shave off a few points here and there mentality that tells them they'll win because they've got the financial muscle to win. But what Virginia showed, and what we're seeing all over the country in these elections that are a harbinger of what's to come, is that voters are seeing through it. They're not falling for it. Now, we should not, be under any illusion, because the kind of disinformation, the kind of deepfake AIs, the kind of dirty tricks that we can expect to suppress the vote, to confuse voters, is only going to escalate. When Steve Bannon tells his billionaire backers, if Democrats win, we're going to prison. All the people in this room are going to prison, starting with me. It's an indication of how much power we have to reset this country, but also an indicator of how desperate they are. And they are desperate and well-financed and willing to do anything to avoid the consequences of their actions come the midterms.
So let's take a look at how Trump responded. Here's his reaction. He posted, "A rigged election took place last night in the great Commonwealth of Virginia. All day long, Republicans were winning. The spirit was unbelievable until the very end, when, of course, there was a massive mail-in ballot drop. Where have I heard that before?" And the Democrats eked out another crooked victory. 6-5 goes 10-1. And yet the presidential election in November was very close to a 50-50 split. In addition to everything else, the language on the referendum was purposefully unintelligible and deceptive. As everyone knows, I am an extraordinarily brilliant person, and even I had no idea what the hell they were talking about in the referendum, and neither do they. Let's see if the counts will fix this travesty of quote unquote justice. President Donald J. Trump. Well, let me just pass the baton to you. What is your response to this? Besides the laughter,
everybody,
right?
I think everybody saw the footage of that marathon where the guy was celebrating too early, just as he gets to the, he's about to cross the tape and he doesn't realize that another runner, the crowd is behind and they're cheering him. And moments before he gets through the tape, the other runner breaks through the tape. And what's fascinating to me is that when people were covering it, when the early stories were that he had been robbed of that victory because he'd celebrated too early, it wasn't his victory. So yes, Donald Trump thought that his billionaire buddies, whose pockets he's been lining, were going to pull a rabbit out of the hat for him, and instead, voters threw those mailers in the trash, got together. We've got to have that same energy, all the way through right now, because we know what happens when people think their vote doesn't matter. They wouldn't be trying so hard to suppress, to lie, to flood us with disinformation, and that is only going to intensify. They wouldn't invest that deeply if our votes didn't matter. And so, hats off to the folks in Virginia for, really showing the rest of the country how important it is. In fact, I think we ought to have an ethic in this country that if Peter Thiel or any of these billionaires that surround themselves and line their pockets because of their proximity and get these government contracts because of their proximity to Trump, if they give to a campaign, vote no. If they give to a campaign, vote against whatever side they're on, because right now the level of desperation is very, very clear. So, at Color of Change, we talk a lot about digital defense and that people have to be media savvy. They have to understand the ways that this level of manipulation. I don't know if there's a test called the Will Smith spaghetti test, and if you haven't Googled it, please do. But it's over the years they would do virtual reality or artificial intelligence versions of Will Smith. And the first one, he looks like a character from Minecraft, but the last one, he's having a one-on-one conversation, eating spaghetti. So there's a level of that's happening, but we're also seeing digital blackface. We're seeing them create synthetic profiles that look like they're the Black community and appear to be people in the Black community voicing opinions. It used to be you could just click on and go, oh, that's not a real person. They are backfilling so that it's harder and harder to tell. This is why organizing in community is so important. And we've really got to build up the muscle, because what they have done so far, even the dirty tricks they played in Virginia, are nothing compared to what's coming.
Yeah, the AI is moving faster than we could ever imagine. Next week, it will be different. I want to bring in my panel here. We've got Michael Brown. He's the former chair of the DNC Finance Committee. And I'm also joined by Robert Patillo, a civil rights attorney with the Patillo Law Group, LLC. I want to start with you, Robert, a question.
So I want to know what's going to be the response to the judicial review of this situation. I think just today, a circuit court judge struck down this, and of course, the AG has already said they're going to appeal. What is the strategy with regards to fighting this through the court system?
Is that to me? Because I'm.
Oh yes, that's for you, Nadine.
Sorry.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, listen, the capture of the Supreme Court right now has been, for Trump, the ultimate backstop. And we're all, awaiting what's going to happen in the Louisiana Calais Supreme Court decision that threatens to, gut voting rights at more deeply than we've seen in modern history. It isn't hyperbole to talk about the worst blow to voting rights since Reconstruction. But there are there are places, even in with the capture of the Supreme Court, where the cracks in his coalition are beginning to show. So, yes, every time he does not prevail, he has the usual playbook. You read it out loud and couldn't keep a straight face because it's absurd. Going to the courts, hoping to push it to a Supreme Court that will do his bidding. But we're also beginning to see a lot of people who whether it's Tucker Carlson or, heaven help us, Candace Owen, there's a fracture in this coalition. His poll numbers are tanking, and the same people who helped get him where he is are beginning to ask themselves, how close to him do I want to be as he collapses? So yes, there will be the same playbook of trying to discredit the election and then, shopping it in the court to try to get to the Supreme Court. But, right now his base is wondering more about what happened at Butler and whether it was staged than they are buying any idea that he's selling that this was rigged.
Michael, a question for Nadine.
Absolutely. Nadine, great work. Congratulations. Obviously, this was just the warm-up, because obviously in November is going to be a much larger fight where people clearly have a better idea of understanding what the stakes are. So keep up the good work. And I think when you mention the savviness of Black and brown voters yesterday, is also about how we have been through this so many times, and now we're so used to these dirty tricks, which started well before 1988, when Governor Dukakis fell victim to some of George Bush's dirty tricks. But nonetheless, we are now here today. And in November, are you going to continue to do the same thing strategically, or are you going to up it a little bit? Because whatever money came into Virginia yesterday from the right is going to be tenfold around the country to keep the house. So don't telegraph all your strategies, but what do you think?
Well, no, I mean, part of it is waking people up to just how pervasive we have watched the media absolutely consolidate into the hands of a few people who are allies of Trump, and not just, Facebook and TikTok and social media apps, but legacy media. Again, we're seeing this consolidation. Even the local news on cable is all coming from a handful of players. And even though it feels like it's that script is being driven by, again, Trump-backed billionaires. And so outlets like this, the voices online, we want to make sure that we continue as an organization that was born online, is native to the terrain that is social media, that we do everything to lift up the values-aligned creators out there. We've got some incredibly talented people all across the country who are breaking this down and showing people what's happening, why it's happening, and how they can defend themselves against it. So we're going to keep amplifying those voices. But for example, I think there are a lot of people that don't realize that right now, you can, what we're seeing is a flood of phony profiles across social media. There's one, for example, of a Black woman selling cowboy hats and belts. And she's got a tear running down her face, talking about how racism is stopping people from buying her wares. This woman does not exist. These are belt buckles from China, but they are using digital blackface to create a narrative. Now, she's just selling belts and hats. What happens when she's selling candidates? Or what we see more often is these synthetic profiles, these fake profiles, telling people, it doesn't matter. They're two wings of the same plane. Don't bother voting. Mm-hmm. They're trying to manufacture a consensus by mimicking the most provocative positions that anyone can hold, but they're not the consensus of our community. So when I say we've got to make sure that people are literate about what is happening, just because you see somebody in your feed, just because if you don't know that person, there are ways to verify where that information is coming from. In the COINTELPRO days, agent provocateurs who kind of push people to not vote or to turn to violence, these kinds of things. That same thing is happening, but it's happening in digital form. So it's not just about planting drugs or putting a gun on a corpse. It is through surveillance. We had a school in Maryland where AI called the police to say there was a gun on campus. This is a school that's 80% Black and Hispanic. When police arrived, there was no gun on campus. AI had misidentified a bag of Doritos. The prevalence of these things in our lives to suppress votes, to foment violence, to pull people into the criminal justice system is something we've got to wake up to. And as you say, whatever we saw so far, whatever we saw in Virginia is nothing compared to what they plan to unleash. And we've got to be ready for it. That's the bad news is it's coming. The good news is we can beat it.
Nadine, as we wrap, let me end with this question. This is a temporary emergency measure. What actually is going to happen when 2030 rolls around?
Well, I think that's why it's important for us to count victories. I mean, it's easy to feel very, what they want us to feel, which is helpless, which is overwhelmed, which is to feel like we're being attacked on all sides. But we're actually posting victories too. We're building muscle as well. And that's why the expectation of what's going to happen in the midterms has shifted in the way it has. But we can't be content. This is not just about elections. It's about building the infrastructure for the democracy we have always deserved. We are defending imperfect institutions against the plundering of this administration. But we've got to have a bigger vision about building the institutions that we deserve, that our kids deserve, that our grandkids deserve. And I think what you're beginning to see and feel in this country is that people are beginning not just to fight Trump, but to imagine what they want to build.
All right, Nadine Smith, Color of Change, thank you for filling in the blanks here, sharing with us what this victory actually means for the long term. Good to see you.
You too.
All right, you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Stay with us. We're going to be back after the break.
I'm Brittany Noble, Midwest-born, HBCU educated with experience in newsrooms across the country. Well, I've teamed up with Roland Martin to bring to you The Breakdown. This isn't just news. It's our stories, our voice, our community. Join me for The Breakdown Monday through Friday at midday, only on the Black Star Network.
My name is Bill Duke, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
All right, on Thursday, community members, civic leaders, clergy, and civil rights organizations in Suffolk, Virginia will publicly oppose the potential establishment of a U.S. Department of Homeland Security and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office in a vacant 9,000 square foot building in the city of Suffolk. Opponents say that the facility is not welcome, and civil rights and community activist Brandon Randleman joins us now to talk about this. Brandon, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
So the word is that this is supposed to be an office, but you do not trust the word. Explain to me what you think is going on and what they are telling you about this 9,000 square foot facility.
Well, let me start here. In the Hampton Roads area, we are an area where we have a lot of federal facilities. We have military bases. We have a lot of federal buildings. To give you a perfect example, in downtown Norfolk, there is a office building, 2 office buildings for federal government agencies. So far, there presently right now is a U.S. Attorney's Office, United States Senators' offices, and the FBI has administrative space there. So if ICE was looking for a legitimate office administrative building, why wouldn't you go to where other federal offices already housed that in our region? So they are proposing coming to the suburbs, tucked away in an industrial area. Let's keep in mind, this was an industrial building. It's in an industrial complex to have office administrative space, as they say, 9,000 square feet of office administrative space in Suffolk, Virginia, and the suburbs, far away from the other federal buildings that they already have.
So, all right, what is it that you have done in terms of speaking with the contractor, the people who are who actually selling the building, and also what has public sentiment been, and how has that worked or not worked so far?
Yeah. So I want to start off by saying the Virginia Pilot is the news agency newspaper that dropped this story. They dropped this story, I believe it was last Tuesday, and immediately as soon as I heard about it, I went before our city council and I asked them what was going on about it, because in the first article, it stated that the city has stated that, well, it's a land use issue. And they also, and then Mr. Garcia stated in the article, who owns the building, he stated that the city stated it was okay because it's a possibility of an administrative building. I went before city council and I told them that if this is a zoning and a land use issue, meaning that if he has a by right to move forward with this because of the current zoning of this, then you have a moral obligation as our elected officials to say, we don't want this. We want to push back against this. It should not be, well, it's just business as usual. Let me be clear. Mr. Garcia owns the building. Mr. Johnny Garcia is of Hispanic descent, and he is the president of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in this region. And now he is possibly going to allow ICE to lease this building.
Do you think you can make any headway with him? I mean, in that he is a Latino, do you think that that opens the door for more headway?
Well, many people have tried to reach out to him. It's hard to find contact information for him. The media has attempted to reach out to him. I have done several local interviews on TV stations. They have always reached out to him before we did the interviews and after we've done the interviews, and he has not said anything. In every interview I've done, I looked at the camera and I stated that I know he's speaking with an official that I know that's locally. He has had conversations with them. I have instructed that local official that they can pass my information along to him, and I have asked them to tell him he can feel free to reach out to me so we can get the community together. I've stated this in interviews. He has not reached out at all. You have to remember, he sat down and did an interview and he says it's just business. That's what he said. It's just business. It's just business as usual for him.
All right, I wanted to bring in our panel. I first want to go to Michael. Michael, you have a question for Brandon.
Hey, Brandon, keep up the good work.
Thank you.
I'm wondering, clearly the council has, or the city itself, has several pieces of ammunition in their ability belt. But the courts can also, Robert can speak better than I can. I'm sure he had better grades in law school than I did. But I'm guarantee that the courts could also get involved with some kind of TRO, the council and or I don't know where the city leadership is on this particular issue. But they certainly have the ability to do something. So I'm glad, Brandon, that you have started to figure out how to fight this.
Right. And I will say this, I've spoken with city leadership, and I know many of them personally because I work to help get them elected to the positions that they're in. And they have made it clear to me that they have pushed back against this. We did, one of the city council members assisted me with making sure there was no conditional use permit attached to this building, meaning that if there was a CUP that had been attached to this building 20 or 30 years ago, he therefore would not have had to go to city council. Remember, this is what he's telling, and this is what he's doing. He is telling the city council that this is going to be an administrative office for ICE, 9,000 square feet of administrative office space. Presently, his building is zoned as M2. It's like a mixed use of industrial and office space. It seems to use what his building is currently zoned as to categorize his proposal to lease the building out to ICE for administrative office space. Also, the city has asked him to submit an application under the new proposed individuals that will lease it so that they can determine whether it falls underneath the zoning. But the city stated to me that technically he doesn't have to submit the application. So We do have city council members that are publicly coming out against this. Some of them will be joining us tomorrow. Some of them will be speaking. One of the particular council members in which it sits in his district, or we call them boroughs out here, he stated that he will be speaking up against this because the district is largely suburban. You have a lot of upper middle class white, upper middle class African Americans. There's a school not too far from it. There's a church, the church that we're having the protest and rally and the press conference at tomorrow. That is at the not too far from the facility, the proposed facility as well.
All right, question from Robert.
Well, great work and everything that you're doing. This is the right fight to be in at this time. People always ask, well, what would you have done during World War II when they were setting up the concentration camps or the internment camps? You're showing that if you were there at that time, you would have been fighting back then just as you are fighting back now. I think that's important for people to understand that we are living at a moment in history that will judge us for generations to come. And they're going to want to know, where were you when this fight was taking place? But my question is that I'm genetically economic Black nationalist. And I understand fighting it through the court system, understand fighting it through social pressure. I understand fighting it in every methodology possible, and I support that 100%. But is there any effort to bring together business owners, philanthropists, concerned communities members, and just lease the building before ICE can lease it? The man said that this is just a business to business, it's a business transaction. Okay, fine. Well, here's our money. We would like to lease the business from you so you don't turn into a concentration camp, and we can use it as a administrative office, community center, food bank, whatever it is. But is there any effort being put into putting the money together and just buying or leasing the building from him?
Well, you know, they say God is always right on time. Before I jumped on this interview, I was talking to a former school board member, and I'm glad you mentioned that. The school board member stated to me that the previous owners and the current owner has tried to lease this building several times. I asked the school board member, I said, you all have been looking for an administrative office building. Why didn't you take this building? Well, originally the building had some type of chemicals, or it was a chemical plant, or chemicals, something dealing with science or chemicals, and it polluted the water really, really bad with the building. They have struggled to lease the building to anyone because of the pollution of the water near the building or around it, connected to the pipelines. And so I believe, from what I was just told by a former school board member, that the school administration wouldn't take the building. The former owners received the building, in my understanding, in a foreclosure. They then held on to it for 2 years, from 2019 to 2024. The current owner, Mr. Garcia, had the building in 2024, and it's been pretty much empty since then. So let that sink in. They want to bring an ICE office to a building that the school administration, who desperately needs a school administration office building, wouldn't even take themselves. And I found out from the former school board chairwoman today that the reason why they wouldn't take it is because the pipes and the water was polluted around the building.
And Brandon, here's what we know. We know that other communities are certainly fighting these facilities, and a lot of them are winning on basis of the strain of the resources, including water, including land. Some of these places, they have concrete on the bottom, and they weren't built in order to have some type of piping system. So I wonder what you've learned from other communities. I know even in Virginia, there was another community that did stop an ICE facility. What are your next steps? What would you like to do? Is there a lawsuit in the making that you think could help? Because so many other communities are using the legal route.
Right. So I think tomorrow is tomorrow's going to be one of our major steps, where we're having African Americans, whites, Blacks, Hispanic community. We're coming together as a whole, along with our community, and we're going to put a lot of public pressure on him, and we're going to see if we can get him to somewhat fold from it. We are looking at our various steps, whether that's a lawsuit, whether that's public pressure. We have to keep in mind that there's some elections coming up for our city council members. I've made that clear as well. But here's the thing. This man has been in contact with ICE for weeks, if not months, because the reason why we had to act so quickly with public pressure, he stated in his article that ICE was trying to make the decision on whether or not they were going to lease the building by the first or second week of May. So it's coming upon us very quickly. We've just tried to act as quickly as we could with the little time that we've had in reference to it. in reference to, and you mentioned something about the economic standpoint. I had someone reach out to me the other day about, well, he could be bringing jobs with ICE. I made it clear to them that this business in this building has had government contracts since 2024, and none of our skin color has had any work in that building. But above all, he's not providing a government service. He's leasing the building out to ICE in the current state that we see ICE in and down.
All right, Michael, I want to close out with you. I think that I cut you off. You had a follow-up question?
No, I'm good. I just want Brandon good luck, and use all the powers that you have, whether political, legal, economic, as Robert mentioned, and do the best you can to stop it.
All right, it was Robert. Thank you. Sorry about that. Robert, you had a follow-up. I'll close with you.
Well, I did have a follow-up on the issue of the kind of usage of it. If the building is in such a condition they can't sell it, can't rent it, there may be an environmental claim that you can put in just to have the state condemn the location as being inhabitable. If you're going to be bringing in thousands of ICE employees for an administrative office to a building that has been condemned for multiple years because of the leakage of toxic chemicals, you may be able to get an injunction to prevent from being used for human habitation in general. So it might be another legal route to explore whether or not the state or the city will let you come in and just simply condemn the property altogether, and then ICE will have to start over to find a new location.
Yes, thank you very much. And again, I can't say what I was told was what the previous maintenance of the building was. I am going to look into that. I just received this word. I'm going to see, was that maintenance fixed? But I know for years that when they've tried to get rid of the building, that's been the stop. That has been the stopping point. And that's why the school administration wouldn't take it on. Now, whether or not he's fixed that since then, that remains to be said or not. But that is something we could look into, because if you use the legal court systems, you can find out from there whether or not those issues have been fixed.
All right, Brandon, thank
Absolutely.
you so much. I know a lot more to come, and we will be following up with you to see what happens. Thank you for all of your hard work.
Thank you.
All right, still to come on Roland Martin, we're going to continue to address the epidemic of fatal domestic violence. The most dangerous time for a person is when they try to leave a violent situation. We're going to walk you how to leave safely and walk you through that and what you need to heal. We're going to talk about that. We'll also talk to a former prosecutor and a current judge about the legalities of domestic violence. You do not want to miss these critical conversations. Meantime, make sure to please support us so we continue to bring you these crucial conversations. You can support us via Cash App using the Stripe code in the bottom left-hand corner. You can also help us with credit cards. Use the same thing. PayPal's R Martin Unfiltered, Venmo's RM Unfiltered, Zelle at RolandSMartin.com. Also at Zelle is Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Now, if you're old school, we'll take those checks too. We'll take those money orders payable too. Roland Martin Unfiltered, P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037. And if you want some of our swag, head on to shopblackstarnetwork.com, where you can find official Black Star Network swag and all kinds of Black-owned products, including my product, Curl Prep. Buying on shopblackstarnetwork.com is a way to support the network and support many, many Black businesses. All right, we're going to be back right after this break. You are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, only on the Black Star Network.
With medicine and science under attack, I want to keep you and your family informed and healthy. I'm Dr. Ebony Hilton, and I knew at the age of 8 that I wanted to be a doctor. So I studied hard and became the first African-American female anesthesiologist hired at the Medical University of South Carolina since its opening in 1824. And I always say I was made into a doctor, but I was born to be a mom. And as a new mom, wife, sister, daughter, and friend, I understand how frightening a medical crisis can be. I care for individuals on some of the worst days of their lives, and it's my mission to provide you with a safe space to gain clarity on issues affecting your mind, body, and soul. I recognize that there are health disparities, particularly as it pertains to race, and I want to help bridge the gap between you and your healthcare providers. Join me every Thursday for Second Opinion on the Black Star Network, where each week I'll invite experts from various medical fields to share the latest health news. We'll discuss topics such as the vaccine debate, mental and sexual health, medical bias, infertility, menopause, andropause, nutrition, and aging. Together with my medical colleagues, we aim to provide you with a second opinion. Don't miss it, Thursdays only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Swing Cash, Basketball Hall of Famer, and you're watching Black Star Network.
It's time for the headlines with Brittany Noble.
Georgia Democratic U.S. Representative David Scott, who was the first black man to chair the U.S. House Agriculture Committee, has passed away after nearly 50 years in elected office. Scott was first elected to the Georgia State Assembly in 1974 and went on to serve for more than 20 years in Congress representing the Atlanta area. Throughout his tenure, he advocated for expanded health care, education, and support for veterans, including legislation to ease student debt for those serving in mental health roles. Congressman David Scott is survived by his wife, 2 daughters, and 2 grandchildren. He was 80 years old. In Louisiana, a former incarcerated man has been sworn in as new clerk of criminal court in New Orleans. Calvin Duncan spent 28 years in prison before being exonerated in 2021 for a murder he did not commit. In November, he was elected to oversee the same criminal court that convicted him. Duncan's victory faced strong opposition from Louisiana's Republican-controlled state legislature, which even considered eliminating the clerk position rather than allowing him to serve. The Detroit City Council has agreed to pay $4 million to settle a lawsuit involving a black man who was wrongfully convicted using false evidence by a former police officer. Levon Hill spent more than 22 years in prison after being convicted of fatally shooting 2 men during a dice game in 2002. He received 2 life sentences. However, the University of Michigan Innocence Clinic later uncovered new evidence and identified 2 eyewitnesses who cleared his name. The review of Hill's case revealed that former police sergeant Walter Bates had pressured a witness to falsely identify Hill as the shooter. Hill was formally exonerated in October of 2024. And rapper Tory Lanez is suing the California Department of Corrections for $100 million following an incident last year in which an inmate stabbed him multiple times. His lawsuit names the prison warden of the California Department of Corrections and approximately 50 correctional officers. On May 12, 2025, he was attacked by a fellow inmate who used a homemade shank to stab him 16 times. The lawsuit questions why no correctional staff was present during the attack and why the response was delayed, leaving him vulnerable to a full assault. As a result of the attack, he suffered 2 collapsed lungs and had to be airlifted to a hospital for treatment. After his recovery, he was transferred to California's Men's Colony Prison and is currently serving a 10-year sentence for the shooting of rapper Megan Thee Stallion in the feat, which occurred in December of 2022. Eric Duncan, a former New York City police officer convicted in a deadly use of force case, has been released from prison while he appeals his sentence. The 38-year-old Duran had been serving a 3 to 9 year sentence for manslaughter after he threw a cooler at a fleeing suspect, which led to the suspect's death. He was released from the Elmira Correctional Facility on Monday after a judge granted him a $300,000 bond. His attorney argues that the conviction represents a miscarriage of justice. As a condition of his release, he has to surrender his passport. And a man associated with white supremacist organizations has pleaded guilty to setting a fire that destroyed an office at a historic social justice center for black communities in Tennessee. Reagan Prater was arrested in April of 2025 in connection with the arson at the Highlander Research and Education Center located in Newmarket. The center has hosted notable figures such as Rosa Parks, John Lewis, and even Martin Luther King Jr. In addition to the arson charges, he's also pleaded guilty to attempting to assist the militant group Hezbollah, a foreign terrorist organization, by providing a list of individuals who may be affiliated with the government of Israel. The arrest occurred more than 6 years after the March 2019 fire, which caused a damage exceeding $1.2 million. His sentencing is set for September 9th. That's in Knoxville. President Donald Trump has extended the fragile ceasefire with Iran for more days as the planned peace talks have collapsed. The White House states that the truce
will last 3 to 5 days, but only if Iran submits a proposal to restart negotiations. Despite the pause in fighting, tensions still remain high. The U.S. continues to maintain its naval presence in the Strait of Hormuz, a critical global oil route. At the same time, Iran is indicating a potential escalation with reports that its Revolutionary Guard has seized 2 vessels.
All right, I just want to talk about the passing of Congressman David Scott out of Georgia. I mean, certainly this was significant. I want to bring in my panelists, Michael Brown and Robert Patillo. You know, what I remember about him specifically was a lot of his work with farming, with agriculture, and the fact that he represented his community and people so well. And when we lose someone like this, we always want to make sure that we acknowledge. I'll start with you, Robert, just in terms of what your thoughts are about his death and what that means in terms of his community and who he served.
Well, I think myself as a both Georgia boy who grew up on an actual farm in Harris County, Georgia, it's been a pleasure of my life working with Congressman Scott over the course of the last couple of decades. In one of my previous roles, executive director of the Rainbow Push Coalition Peachtree Street Project, I headed up the Black Farmer Initiative for Reverend Jesse Jackson, who also passed recently. And one of the things that we worked on, particularly with then Chairman Scott as well as Secretary Vilsack, was to secure funding for African-American farmers. This was then held up, of course, by Stephen Miller and conservative groups, et cetera, that ensured that that money never actually got to those farmers. But people need to understand that our Black farmers, our ranchers, our agricultural producers are the lifeblood of our community. You cannot be a community if you cannot feed yourself. There's no group on earth that depends on another group for their sustenance that can truly call themselves independent. The example that he actually spoke to me about at one point in time was if you look at the Palestinians in Gaza who have to depend on the Israelis for their food, you see that keeps them in a constant point of subjugation in those communities. So it's crucial for us to understand not just the work that he did, because the work on the Agricultural Committee is not the glamorous work that you'll see on Ways and Means. It's not the television hearings that you'll see when it comes to foreign affairs or intelligence. But it is perhaps the most crucial part for any community, ensuring that we are able to take care of and to feed ourselves and to grow our communities. And we really have to, I implore all of you, find a local Black farmer, find a local Black co-op, find a local farmer's market, and go spend your money directly with your own people. Not only will the food be better, it'll be healthier, but you're also helping to keep Black farms in business who are currently in a crisis stage. They've been in a crisis stage for the better part of a generation, but those federal funds that go to large agricultural corporations are not making it down to those mom and pop farmers who even have to lease the seeds that go into the ground. They have to lease the fertilizer. They have to lease the manufacturing, the tractors, the equipment, etc. And we need tireless advocates like David Scott on that agricultural committee, like Jonathan Jackson, and many of the others who are standing up for our people and our communities to ensure that we have what we need. But at the same time, we have to come and have a sobering conversation. I worked on Capitol Hill for 2 years. Just left earlier this year. In that period of time, I saw Cleo Field, Senator Congressman Turner, the day that he passed away. We've seen multiple Democrats pass away over the course of the last several years. And it's really time to have the conversation about not just passing the baton, but mentoring, bringing up the people behind you. Don't just leave when somebody beats you. If you know that you're getting up there in gears and you have and you need to pass this knowledge on, find somebody and train them so you can simply hand them the seat to ensure continuity, and that there's not this mad dash and scramble like we saw, like we often see when many of our leaders pass away. So it's time for that generational conversation not just to take place, but to accelerate. And even in your own personal life, if you have older members of your family, make sure you are getting the family information from them. Those are the griots of our community. Get those recipes, get those family stories, get those traditions, write them down, and prepare them to be passed on going forward. So I cannot commend Congressman Scott enough on the work that he has done. We are walking in the footsteps of giants, and he was indeed a giant. Seeing him on the House floor in a wheelchair, showing you the strength that he had, showing you the passion that he had to fight to his last days. is crucial for our community to understand, but also it's crucial for us to pick up, to understand Father Time is undefeated. And we have to start making preparation to pass the baton on to the millennials and to Gen Z and even to Gen Alpha, because those will be the foot soldiers going forward.
That's right. Thank you for that, Michael. I want to pass it to you because certainly 50 years, that is a long time. And it is a long time to say, let me bring somebody up. Your thoughts about the meaning of his serving and what he did for the community. Okay, Michael, I think you're muted. Is he becoming unmuted, Michael? Michael, you are muted. All right. Listen, stay with us. We'll be back after the break. See you on the other side.
Hey, y'all. Welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network and hosted by myself, Rhea Baker, and my good sis, Jamira Burley. We are just two millennial women tackling everything at the intersection of politics, gender, and pop culture.
And we don't just settle for commentary. This is about solution-driven dialogue to get us to the world as it could be and not just as it is.
Watch us on the Black Star Network, so tune in to The Other Side of Change.
With medicine and science under attack, I want to keep you and your family informed and healthy. I'm Dr. Ebony Hilton, and I knew at the age of 8 that I wanted to be a doctor. So I studied hard and became the first African-American female anesthesiologist hired at the Medical University of South Carolina since its opening in 1824. And I always say I was made into a doctor, but I was born to be a mom. And as a new mom, wife, sister, daughter, and friend, I understand how frightening a medical crisis can be. I care for individuals on some of the worst days of their lives, and it's my mission to provide you with a safe space to gain clarity on issues affecting your mind, body, and soul. I recognize that there are health disparities, particularly as it pertains to race, and I want to help bridge the gap between you and your healthcare providers. Join me every Thursday for Second Opinion on the Black Star Network, where each week I'll invite experts from various medical fields to share the latest health news. We'll discuss topics such as the vaccine debate, mental and sexual health, medical bias, infertility, menopause, andropause, nutrition, and aging. Together with my medical colleagues, we aim to provide you with a second opinion. Don't miss it, Thursdays only on the Black Star Network.
Hey everybody, I'm T.D. Jakes, and I want to encourage you to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered. It'll blow your mind.
All right, so what you've just been looking at are the faces and names of some of the women who have died in the last few weeks at the hands of a loved one. And all week, we have taken the time to confront the epidemic of fatal domestic violence. And tonight, we're going to be talking about how to remove yourself from a violent situation and then how to heal yourself once you are out. Joining me now are Robin May, a licensed professional counselor, and Alma Davis. She is the founder and CEO of the Alma Domestic Violence Foundation. Thank you, both of you, for being with us today. I first want to start with you, Alma, and I know that the process of actually removing yourself from a situation, we know it's a case-by-case basis because it all looks so different. But based upon your experience, are there some same through lines with the cases that you've dealt with and what you know about the best way to get out?
Yeah, so we first have to set the stage that when someone is leaving, that's the most dangerous part of being in a domestic violence relationship is the leaving part. And so what we want to do is try to provide clients or people in those situations with steps to actually prepare to leave. So some of the things that we first talk about is having a safety plan, meaning it's thought out. There are some things that you've put in place, like one, having a copy of your driver's license, maybe hidden somewhere, a copy of Social Security cards, birth certificates, things of that nature, even down to having things about your children, right, hidden. Some things else we would tell someone is to have a code word, meaning you've talked to your safe space if you have that, whether that's an organization that's helped you put a safety plan together, whether that's a close relative, and even down to your children. Hey, if I give you this code word, that means it is time to go. One, either that means I'm in danger, or two, that means it's time to go. So either way, that is an immediate action. We would tell people to also do things like change your route, right? Don't be so predictable, so that that abuser can't find you. So really think through those things and plan that out. Another great tip that we like to share with people is if you are able to call an organization like ours that a case manager can actually walk you through those things, that would be the most beneficial because number one, as the case manager, we are trained to give you things to think about that you haven't thought about, like understanding that, listen, when you get ready to leave, things may escalate. So we want to help you sort of navigate through when is the right time to leave, right? Number one, if the person is not home, right? If that's an optimal time to leave, if that person is gone to work or something like that. So if you have an agency that does this, we can walk you through those things. But if that's not the case, even like going to our website or the National Domestic Violence Hotline, you can see an actually safety plan, and we'll ask you those types of questions to help you sort of get prepared to go. It's never an easy thing to leave, but it's one of the most powerful things that you can do once you've made the decision that, hey, it's time to go.
What do you tell your children who might be of age, they actually understand what's going on? What does that conversation look like in terms of the secrecy of all of this and the planning? There's a lot of trust, and you have children that are scared and still might love, well, they probably do love their father, right? We know that there's that.
Right.
How do you have those conversations, and what do good ones look like?
So I would say, so we just don't exclude women. Sometimes that abuser can be a woman as well. And so whether it's male or female, what you want to relate to those children is, listen, hey, mommy loves you. Mommy or daddy loves you. I need you to trust me. You know, it has not been a good situation, right? And mom or dad, we want to keep you safe. So when mommy gives you a word, I don't want you to ask me questions. I want you to trust mommy that means it's time to go. And when it's time to go, that means let's be quiet. Definitely can't tell other people that we are planning this. And again, it goes to, you got to figure out what's age appropriate, right? Someone that's in high school or middle school will understand more that, hey, when I give you this word, let's go. I made a safety plan, a safety key. If I call you and use this word, let's go, versus a little one right? Who, trust me, understands to a point that they know that it has not been an easy environment to live in. Because one of the things that happens with children, they deal with secondary trauma, right? And so if they've been in that environment, they know how that makes them feel. And it's having that age appropriate conversation, say, hey, you know how you don't like to see mommy cry, or daddy doesn't like to see you cry, because sometimes you feel we're getting hurt. Well, I want to change that situation. And you have to sort of have that age appropriate to help them understand that this is a happy place that we're going to, it may even be that hey, we're going to take a little vacation, but it's going to be a surprise for daddy. So shh, we can't tell anybody, those types of things. And that's what case managers can sort of help you think through based on the age appropriation.
Yeah, obviously, this sounds very familiar. I'm sorry, Robin, this sounds very familiar. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about your advice, what you would give some? We are going to eventually talk about the healing process, but I'm certain that you would echo what has already been spoken and more.
Absolutely. And I think one of the consistent messaging that I would say to a woman is what Alma said. This is not going to be easy, that there is a price that she will be paying for her safety, but the other side of that is her life. And so I would keep stressing, normalizing. This is the key. This is the key. Normalizing that the distress she's feeling, the angst that she's feeling, the fear that she's feeling, that's absolutely normal, and that's a part of the process. The other dynamic I would say in the middle of a woman choosing safety is what Alma said, of course, having a safety word or a safety plan, but also having at least one additional person who is aware of the plan, one person, even if it has to be somebody out of town, at least one other person who is aware, so that you're not navigating it alone. And then the third thing I would add, as a therapist, to make sure you're staying in contact with your therapist. And I would even advise to make sure that the children have a therapist, because a therapist can also partner with you in it. Here's one of the things about intimate partner violence or domestic violence. It feels so lonely. It feels so lonely. But the truth is, there are so many people who are just waiting. In my world, I call it waiting on ready. They're waiting to support you. And so if there's someone, if there's someone watching this right now, it feels so lonely. But I promise there are a team of people who want to rally around you.
I heard you. You can chime in.
Yeah, I think she is spot on. And when she talks about that team of people, it's important to help people understand that when we are getting you prepared, right, there are also some other things that you probably have not even thought about, like your animal. A lot of times people don't want to leave a domestic violence situation because of that pet. Because what goes hand in hand with domestic violence is a lot of times the pets are abused. But if you reach out to an organization like ours or Partnership Against Domestic Violence, we can help you. Because we have contacts with shelters that will keep your animal for up to 3 months at no cost to make sure you are safe. A lot of times, because this is a fast moving moment. So the more planning that you can do would be, optimal. But we want to remind you of things, key things like make sure you're documenting the bruising. If you have bruising, writing things down, if you can, putting it in a safe place, your medicines. Because a lot of people don't think about when you're on the run, you're on the go, you don't even think about that medicine that may be needed. Making extra copies of keys. So we want to support you as you make this brave decision to leave. And the more that we can help you, I totally agree, having a therapist that can help sort of walk you through the emotions that you're feeling, because it is a big step. Right? It's one of the most important and largest steps you may make in literally saving your life. And I mean literally saving your life. So having that support system, having that community that can not only hold your hand, but give you tangible things is so essential and so important.
And what you do, Alma, is it that somebody reaches out to you and then you have almost like a consultation with them to lead them through a plan so that they can carry out that plan of action? Is that how it works when someone
Yes.
reaches out to your organization?
Yes, they can call us either directly on our 800 number line. And the first thing we do is an intake. So that first step is someone reassuring you that you're safe. It is okay to talk to us. You can give as much information as you want or as much information as you don't want to give. And then we partner you with a case manager. And that case manager hears you out. That case manager is trained to give you all the different tools and essential things that you may need. You may think you're calling just for a safety plan when that case manager has identified, well, no, we need to get you emergency shelter, or no, we need to make sure you have a ride, or no, we need to set up where you have baby food or the things that you need, or a care kit when you leave. So yes, those are the steps that we take. We will match you with that case manager. We hold your hand all the way through the process. We don't just give you a phone number to call if there is someone that is not in our area, because we service all over the United States. We will find that close partner that will walk you through, and then we're going to continue to check in on you. Whether we've partnered you with someone else, whether we do a 30-day check-in, we do a 60-day, and then we continue to identify, we involve you in your case planning, right? What do you need to make you successful? If that's housing, if that's you need a job, what are those things? If that's therapy, we do have licensed therapists on staff. We even have a legal department, legal advocates that will help you with filing a TPO. We go to court with you, right? Making sure that you know that you are not alone in this process.
And by TPO, you mean temporary protective order.
Temporary protective order, yes. I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah, I think what's interesting in a lot of women that I speak to, that they don't know the time that it does take. It doesn't happen overnight. You do have to plan quite a bit, Robin, in terms of getting it together so that something doesn't go awry. You might have to save money. You might have to make sure that things are in order. And you just have to kind of get it all together in order to make a strategic plan. You might have to do a little bit of acting in the meantime, but take the time to get the plan right.
Absolutely. I love that you even said giving women the grace to know that it might take them first time to build up. I'm so careful to say courage because that can imply that someone who stays isn't being courageous, but that's the best way for us to frame it. Let's say this, an additional level of courage that it might take time to build that up. And then also, as you just indicated, if you have to play the game to get through, do that as you're making the plan. Remember, you don't have to, or you don't need to announce what your decision is. And if you have to play nice over that period of time, play nice. And also, another indicator, another aspect of this that I think is important for us to consider is that even if it has not gotten to the level of physical violence, if you are seeing behavior that is controlling, if you're seeing anger that's getting out of control, if you are seeing raised voices, if you're feeling isolated, those are warning signs as well. So we don't want to minimize even the non-violent abuse that can take place.
Yeah, exactly. And often that nonviolent abuse, I mean, it can be done in front of people. You don't even recognize it, and it's still just as impactful when someone's demeaning you out in public, or using finances to control you, or your kids to, make you look like a bad mother or father. We are going to talk later this evening with someone else about the legal component of it. We know that that's another layer. Another layer of this is on the other side in terms of getting out. Now you are outside of a domestic violent relationship, and the healing needs to begin in some way. I want to start with you, Robin, by just asking you, what does the beginning of that healing process look like? Because I find that a lot of women, they certainly don't think that their instinct skills are sharpened enough. They're normally on hyper, vigilant, kind of looking at everybody, that everybody might be a threat. And so their whole nervous system is kind of reacting differently because of what they have just come from. How does that healing begin?
You know, it's interesting. I'm so glad that you said the word nervous system, because once a woman has navigated the pain and the trauma, because we need to call it what it is, the pain and the trauma of domestic abuse, it literally changes how your nervous system functions. I'm sure most of the viewers have heard of the term Maslow's hierarchy of need. Often, when I'm working with a woman who is rebounding after any type of traumatic romantic relationship, I often point to that because a lot of people learned about that in Psychology 101 in high school. But Maslow's hierarchy of need talks about the stages to self actualization, feeling good about yourself. And that's a great place to start post leaving a violent situation. When we think about that, it is, first of all, your safety, just your basic physiological needs. Are those in place? And then your physical safety, your financial safety. And then we can start looking at love and belonging and esteem and building yourself up. And that takes time, because often after you have been in a domestic situation, any little thing, your trauma response is heightened. I'm sure many of you have heard a song and it takes you right back to where you were when you first heard that song. That's what happens with trauma. That's what happens with domestic abuse. The survivor could smell something. She could smell something and have a physiological reaction because it's taking her right back to that place. And so the first thing I'm doing when I'm working with a woman is helping her rebuild her safety in her body, rebuild her trust of her senses, and her trust in knowing what's okay for her and what's not. And let me tell you something that's often missed. I'm also helping that woman, watch this, because when a woman comes to me after being in a traumatic situation, she often second guesses her own decisions. And what often happens, unintentionally, she will latch on to the next person that feels safe, even if it's her therapist. And so, what I am often doing is slowly helping that woman rebuild her trust in her own decision making, rebuild her trust to be able to say, I don't want this. I do want that. I want to go here. I don't want to go there. Giving her practice in owning her choices is a huge part of the process. And then I want to share this because it has worked really powerful with a lot of the women that I work with. I encourage women to start envisioning, visualizing exposure therapy to the woman they want to be. Who is the woman that you want to be? What does whole look like to you? What does healing look like to you? And what would that woman do? Watch this, that you are not doing. When I tell you that exercise, it gives me chills every time I watch a woman do it. Who is the woman that you want? What does whole look like? What does a healed version of you look like? And how can we start practicing that version of you until you believe it? So I want to give you an example. The woman might tell me, well, I always wanted to go back to school, and he told me I couldn't go back to school. The topic. Let's just start looking at YouTube. Start looking at YouTube videos on that topic. When you come back to session, tell me something new that you discovered on that subject that you want to learn about. Because I want you to start embodying the woman that you want to be. Here's the thing, the only way through is to go through. And that means going through the difficult portion of releasing what occurred and becoming who you want to be.
Right, because these situations, they can change your whole personality to an outsider looking in. You really shift to another person because you're always in defense. I do want to talk about the healing process, but then what does that look like when you are co-parenting? That is exceptionally difficult. And from the both of you, I wanted to know, how do you co-parent with this person if they don't go behind bars and maybe they go through an anger management course, but they still are allowed to see the children? I want to start with you, Alma, and then we'll go to you, Robin.
Yeah, that is something very difficult that a lot of our clients have to face and have to deal with, because you're right. If that person has not been served or has not been put behind bars, a lot of times we will see where that abuser will try to gain custody of those children, or even paint the survivor out to be the abusive parent. right? And so some of the things that we have to focus on and work through is even the thought process and the thinking of the survivor. We've seen so many times where the survivor will say, oh, well, it's fine for me to meet that person at the school or at the daycare for them to see the child because they wouldn't do anything to hurt the child. And of course, we've seen incidents even in the news where that abuser has showed up and not only hurt, kill, or might have, killed the survivor, but even hurt that child. So one of the things that we try to do, and I love what Robin said about giving choices, is making them feel empowered to clearly understand the circumstances, right? What may or may not happen, but helping them think through, let's look at what if this happens? And like I said, we're wanting them to empower to make the right choice. But if not, we want to help you understand, well, what are some of the backup choices that have? Do you have to meet them alone? Do you have to meet them at the daycare? If you're going to do that, is that daycare aware that this parent is coming up to see them? If there has been a legal process or a TPO, we try to, which is a temporary protective order, we try to encourage them to allow the law to help sort of navigate that, right? Meeting with it might be someone that unfortunately, like outside agencies have gotten involved and they are that neutral party that's there. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that our client or that survivor is safe and their children are safe, because if you pay attention to the Amber Alerts, over 90% of those Amber Alerts come all from when the children are missing, they're coming from domestic violence or family violence situations, right? So using the skills, but again, empowering that survivor to sort of think, but not be so easy to trust that abuser, right? So that they're making some concrete decisions that will still keep them safe, but keep their children safe.
Robin, same question about co-parenting.
I really want to piggyback off of what Alma said, because this process is exhausting for a woman. By the time a woman makes a decision to leave, we have to imagine how long she has been carrying the reality of this situation. So by the time she leaves, that's just like we just said, the start of her being able to take a deep breath and rediscover herself, and then to partner with raising a child with someone that harmed her. So the reason why I really wanted to piggyback off of what Alma said is this. I often find that women say, I just can't keep this up. I'm tired of this tension. I'm tired of having to be on guard. I'm tired of let's just be okay, because they're often still trying to believe the best. And it seems insensitive to say, but you cannot let your guard down. You simply cannot, because it's only going to create a pathway for possible harm. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to say. But as far as co-parenting, one of the aspects that I deal with so often with my clients is two things. I definitely deal with so many women who have navigated being isolated and alienated from their child. It's a very real thing. But I have a lot of hope for so many women, because almost every woman that I've worked with who went through parent and alienation, the child has come back. They have been able to restore their relationship with their child. But in the meantime, if it doesn't go to that extreme where you're being alienated, I want you to think about the person, just like I said, who is the woman you want to be? Then I want you to think about, what are the characteristics that are critically important to you for your child? And I want you to focus on those. When I'm talking about characteristics, what are the values that you want your child to have? Because you're partnering in parenting with someone who often what is happening when they are with them is totally different than what is happening in your home. And if you get into the battle of that parent against me, you're not going to win that battle. And so I want you to focus on, when I think about my own children that I'm raising, I want you to be a woman of integrity. What does that mean? How can I start pouring that into you? I want you to be a young man that when your yes is yes and your no is no, how do I help you learn those skills? Even if you have to look up books, if you have to find book resources, if you have to find mentorship, if you have to find organizations that partner with helping to develop young people. And here I go again, but I am telling you, put the child in counseling. Make sure that the child is in counseling as well, because the counselor can also, number one, help that child navigate their emotions, but number two is a safety for you. If the child is reporting any concerns, that therapist now has an ethical and legal obligation that's outside of you. So put the child in therapy. And then third, be willing to go to therapy with them as well. I think those several things. Number one, keeping your guard up, recognizing, I know it's exhausting, I know it is tiring, but when you let your guard down, you're very likely putting yourself back in a danger zone. Number two, making sure you are focused on, I am not in competition with this parent. This is not co-parenting. This is parallel parenting. I want to make sure that I am pouring into my child what I want them to know, who I want them to be, and then get support. Go to therapy, because now you have a support system that can help you in partnering with the child.
All right, so we have a couple of minutes, and so I want to each of you give you 1 minute on this question, because I see this happen a lot with women too. They don't know what to do with their social circles. You know, I've seen women detach from everything, their church, his side of the family, everything, and that worked out. And I've seen other people try to stay with the same church that, you know, he might go to, or vice versa, if it's a man being abused, or try to still keep the same circle of friends and share. But it is very difficult. And I am wondering, what is your advice? I will start with you first, Alma, and then I will end with you, Robin, about how to navigate, because you lose that social currency. What do you do there?
So I'll say twofold. One, we do a lot of times let clients know when you are escaping, unfortunately, you will have to separate. It may be temporary, but we got to focus in on you and getting you to safety. Because a lot of times you have that abuser's parent reaching out, wanting to get reconnected, but they're actually reaching out for that abuser, wanting to find out where you are. If you have turned your location off, which we advise you to do on all your devices, they're trying to find all of those friends or those networks to find where that survivor is, because they are used to controlling that person, whether it's through church members, whether it's through your work. We've seen abusers show up at people's friend's house looking for that client. So it's important to help them in the reality know you may have to separate yourself for your safety and for your child's safety. I would say that we have worked with several churches that have a safe network that they know that, hey, if they have a parishioner or someone that is coming to them saying, I'm in this domestic violence relationship, and they reach out to us, and that abuser goes to the church as well. We have worked with some phenomenal churches that have stepped in and told the abuser, I'm sorry, but you're no longer allowed to worship. It may be worship at the same time as the client is. Things like that, because you don't want to, stop them, because they need healing as well, right? But it's strategic to make sure that we are not putting that client in harm's way. It may be that that client exits out a back door, but it's the proactive things that we do along as a partnership with the churches. But again, for helping that client find a safe person, right? Because it is lonely. It is alienating. But just thinking through, what does that safety look like for you? Again, it may be temporary, it may be long-term, but at the end of the day, we're trying to keep you and your children safe.
All right, Robin, the last 60 minutes is yours. 60 seconds, actually.
What I would say, 60 seconds, yes. What I would say is that I want you to take a deep breath and recognize that this is going to be a grieving process. There's going to be grief connected to this. There will be loss connected to this. But here's a way that I try to frame it. If you are leaving a violent relationship, and anybody who continues to be in relationship with someone who is violently harming you, that's not anybody you need to be in relationship with anyway. If you frame it in that way, if you recognize anybody who is willing to keep you connected to somebody that was harming you isn't who you need to be in relationship with anyway. And so it is a grieving process. There is no way that we can get around it. There will be loss. There will be relationships that are lost, but the hope is that there will be healthy relationships you will be able to establish. So while you go through the grieving process, you can see a light at the end of the tunnel. There will be relationships that are healthy, that are whole, and that are healing for you.
All right, Alma Davis and Robin May, I want to thank you so much. Amazing advice. If you know, I'm over here taking notes mentally, and I'm sure that other people out there are doing the same thing. Thank you so much for the information that will, I'm sure, guide someone to a safer reality. Good to have you.
Thank you.
All right, and when we come back, we are going to go into the justice system, look into the legalities. What happens when you, as a victim of domestic violence, goes and tries to deal with the law? What is a temporary restraining order? Does it really work? All right, stay with us. We're going to have some more excellent advice when we come back.
Welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network and hosted by myself, Rhea Baker, and my good sis, Jamira Burley. We are just two millennial women tackling everything at the intersection of politics, gender, and pop culture.
And we don't just settle for commentary. This is about solution-driven dialogue to get us to the world as it could be and not just as it is.
Watch us on the Black Star Network, so tune in to The Other Side of Change.
How you doing? I'm Mark Curry, and you're watching the Black Star Network. That's why I got these glasses on, because that black star is bright.
All right, we just talked to Alma and Robin about removing yourself from a violent situation and the process of healing, beginning to heal. But what about the legal aspects? How can the legal system assist you if you are facing domestic violence? How helpful are temporary restraining orders? I know a lot of people have that question. Well, joining us now are Marilyn Mosby, the former state's attorney for Baltimore, and Vonda Bailey, the presiding judge of the 255th District Court in Dallas County, Texas. Thank you so much for being with us today, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, Marilyn, I wanted to begin with you because I know that you have seen a lot. And I just wanted to give you a situation that perhaps might have come into your courtroom. What is it that you would say to someone who might be going through a situation where there is job loss, where there is divorce, where there are kids that are in this situation, all of those kind of common elements that I'm seeing in terms of some of these headlines? When you get that into a courtroom, what happens to all of those facts? How is it parsed and dealt with when you enter into a courtroom? And what does the justice system actually, what can it do for you?
So I think it's really, really important to understand that domestic violence is not just limited to the obvious sort of visible physical assaults, right? There are many sort of incidents that can and often do warrant criminal charges, even when there are no obvious sort of injuries. This includes threats of violence, stalking, harassment, strangulation attempts, destruction of property. I mean, there could be any number of coercive actions, repeated unwanted contact, violations of protective orders, and the violence and intimidation that can and often does, it extends to children. So when we think about, those things that go beyond the visible sort of injuries, you can even have technology facilitated sort of abuse, such as tracking someone, hacking accounts, distributing private images, which often crosses that line into sort of criminal behavior. But the broader sort of takeaway, and as you've already kind of talked about from the several high profile sort of domestic violence related cases that we've seen just in the past week, whether it's Justin Fairfax, who shot and killed his wife during a domestic dispute amid a contentious sort of divorce before taking his own life while his children were present in the home, or Shamar Elkins in Louisiana, who fatally shot his wife, her sister, and 8 children, right? 7 of whom were his own. To just 2 days ago, you had the singer David, who was charged with an alleged murder of a 14-year-old girl, right? Like the broader sort of pattern that I saw and that we see all across the country in the courtrooms is that these triggering sort of life events, like a divorce, like a separation, custody disputes, prior threats, and as we already kind of discussed, coercive control and firearms on top of that, right? That type of access can sharply increase the danger in domestic violence situations.
And before I go to the judge, I want to just ask you this, Marilyn. It also is all about the evidence, because when you get to court, you better have those notes, you have to have the evidence, and you have to have everything in order to actually prove your case, because that's all the judge will have. That's all both sides, you know, the prosecutor or anybody will have that is dealing with the case.
Absolutely. I mean, you brought up a great point, and the possible charges are going to depend on the facts of the case and the evidence available. They may include assault in varying degrees, reckless endangerment, harassment, as we already talked about, stalking, trespassing, malicious destruction of property, kidnapping. I mean, there are any number of charges, but it is going to depend on the facts of the case and the evidence available. Every sort of state labels offenses differently, but the core issue is whether someone used violence, threats, fear, or coercion to control another person.
Yeah, and Judge, I think that that's the key here, that there are some things that men and women go through who are victims of domestic violence that they have labeled maybe kind of, you know, choosing a lower hanging fruit. Oh, they're just mean, they're just stubborn, they're just mad, you know, they just need a little time. When really, when you get into a court, it translates into a criminal offense. It translates into you getting some type of restraining order. So again, you have to pay attention to your situation and understand that you're even a victim of domestic violence sometimes.
Absolutely. And that's a key point. I don't believe that sometimes people are really aware that they are in a domestic violence type situation. Sometimes it's out of embarrassment. It could be out of fear. And as a judge, you know, when I'm sitting on the bench and I'm looking outward, I'm able to pick up on some of the things that the victim is not necessarily saying. I'm paying attention to body language, very important. I'm looking at those text messages, you know, are they escalating? Or has it been a situation where the children have witnessed something? Because a lot of these situations occur in front of children. So it can be a variety of different things, and you have to be able to pay attention as a judge of those little nuances and indicators that are not necessarily clear all the time. But to your point about the evidence is going to be key in a lot of these situations, because the evidence could be the thing that holds someone accountable for that domestic violence conviction or finding, particularly in family court, or it could be the very thing that gets them off the hook.
Mm-hmm. Judge, when does someone actually go to jail? What does that situation look like? Because I hear a lot of women talk about, if I could get them in jail for a number of years, I would feel very safe. But they see situations where men and women go to jail for just a very short time, then they get out and it starts all over again. So I'm wondering what that looks like in terms of like a real actual solution of keeping the perpetrator away from the victim.
So initially, they are incarcerated for a limited amount of time because, you know, in Texas, they have the right to have a bond hearing. They have the right for bail to be set. So they're not going to stay incarcerated necessarily for a long time. on a situation involving domestic violence. Now, if you're talking about someone going to prison for a certain amount of years, those are usually in your more extreme cases, and they're not necessarily going to prison on their first time, because depending on the offense itself, something like aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, if the perpetrator does not have a criminal history, they may be probation eligible, which means that they'll be right back in the community, able to offend. That does not mean that they're not going to reoffend, but they're out there back in the community again. It really just depends on the circumstances. Usually, from my experiences as a probation officer previously, those situations where people were incarcerated for a long length of time were the more severe situations of domestic violence, you know, like the attempted murders or actual murder, an aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, which could be like a vehicle per se that seriously injures someone or causes a missing limb of the victim. You know, it's more of those extreme cases, but for the most part, when they are arrested for a situation of domestic violence, they're usually not incarcerated very long.
Yeah, and that is part of the issue, I think, sometimes, Marilyn, is that many people don't believe in the system because if they are a first-time offender, well, they just come back out and they're even madder. So can you walk me through, for example, a temporary restraining order or a civil restraining order? I know there are criminal restraining orders. That's something that a prosecutor does. But just the restraining order itself, so many people say, it's just a piece of paper. What is that going to do for me? How does that translate for you in terms of, well, maybe it does do something, or would you say otherwise, that there has to be other things in place?
So temporary restraining orders are often called TROs or temporary protective orders. Again, it's going to depend on the jurisdiction in the state. They're often civil court tools designed to create immediate sort of safety, okay? So they can order an abuser to have no contact. They stay away from the home or the workplace, surrender firearms, vacate a shared residence in some circumstances, and stop harassment. They can be highly effective when enforced promptly and taken seriously by the courts and law enforcement. But they are not, as you've already indicated, a magic sort of shield. A piece of paper alone does not stop an abuser determined to inflict violence, which is why safety planning, law enforcement response, and community support are extremely critical. Right? It is extremely important to, and I don't want to diminish the importance of these temporary protective orders. It's extremely important to file one when someone feels unsafe or there is a pattern of escalating abuse. Filing for a temporary restraining order or a protective order creates a legal record that can then trigger the court protections that the judge was just referencing, right? It may become important evidence later if criminal charges are pursued. It can help with custody, it can help with housing stability, and even access to sort of services. So making that and creating that legal record is critical.
So when do you actually call the police? Now, we know people are often hesitant to call the police to their homes because, well, I mean, one, they're embarrassed. Number two, they don't want something to happen to their loved one if something goes awry once you let a police officer into your home. But Judge, can you take me from when a police officer you think should be called, and then what happens in terms of going from there and then having your day in court?
My recommendation would always be to call the police at the onset, right? Because you don't want a situation that turns into a simple argument to escalate into something else. Now, don't anyone out there misquote me and say that Judge Bailey said if I'm getting into an argument, call the police. That's not what I'm saying. However, when there has been a history or a pattern of domestic violence, and you have been in this situation before, and you notice those signs, and you can tell that the situation is escalating, it may not be a bad idea at that point to have law enforcement intervention. So they can go ahead and create their record. If someone needs to leave the home, they can leave the home. If there are children that are present in the home, someone needs with the children or need to have a plan where someone picks up the children. It's just, that's literally how it starts, right? Now, when you're talking about arresting someone, there are a number of things that the victim can do. Automatically, the victim can pursue what's called a magistrate protective order, which it takes place in our what are called justice of the peace courts here in Texas. You can get one of those protective orders, and they are good for 60 days. And, they have all type of protections in terms of not to go within so many feet of the house, this person's residence, the child's school, all of those things. So you're creating that record already, and you can take that same protective order to the family courts in front of me and get a permanent protective order entered, which is usually 2 years. Now, there are some situations where that 2-year period can be extended. It just depends on, if this person was already under an existing protective order or, I lost my train of thought on that one, but you can get a protective order for different reasons beyond the 2 years, right? So just going from that process is nothing that happens necessarily immediately. Now, it can happen fast. And when I say fast, we're talking about a couple of weeks. But just think about what can happen in a couple of weeks. We've just recently witnessed it. People can be, unfortunately, it can be a situation where it's fatal. Not only for the victim, it could be fatal for the child or the children that are in the situation. It can also be fatal for people that are innocent bystanders. Let's say you call a friend over and you say, I need you to help me move my stuff. And you just so happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I encourage people to contact law enforcement from the onset, but also make sure that you're documenting and make sure that you are doing things to protect yourself and the children, if any children are involved. That includes getting the locks changed, changing your phone number, moving, changing up how you move, not going to the same places that you would normally go to. A lot of these relationships, they may have been long-term, maybe marriages, so they know where your people live. They know where your friends live. Try to figure out a plan not to go that way. It's a laundry list of things that can necessarily happen in between time, but the best thing is to always have a plan. You have to have a plan. That's not to say that the plan will necessarily be 100% from start to finish, but the more you can plan, the better you're able to protect yourself, create their record, and get under some order of protection that will be best beneficial for, you, yourself, and your children, if any are involved.
Now, once you enter into the court system, Marilyn, is there an advocate or someone to help you through all of this? Because it is a lot. You also might be getting a divorce in the middle of all of this. In addition, you may not have money. What does that look like in terms of resources that you might get from the courts in order to help you navigate through all of this?
So again, you bring up a really great point. Just identifying that you're going through this type of abuse. It's usually going to be the pattern of escalation and abuse. But then once you are into the system, and we have victim witness advocates. We have, the folks that were on your segment before, the clinicians and the therapists and the individuals that can assist you through that process. But it's really identifying that pattern first. And then the larger sort of takeaway for those survivors of domestic abuse is that they shouldn't be discouraged, right, from seeking protective orders simply because they're worried about nothing happening, right? You have to recognize these threats and these patterns really do matter. And the timing is really critical. So I know the judge was referencing what happens in Texas, but the timing for these petitions, they vary by state and by jurisdiction. But the emergency or temporary orders are often available the same day or within 24 hours, right? Especially when there is an immediate sort of safety concern where someone believes that their life may be in jeopardy. There's a follow-up hearing typically through various states a follow-up hearing for a longer-term protective order that may take days and or weeks. And obviously, the criminal cases, as we've already discussed, can take longer depending on the evidence, witnesses, and the court schedules. But once you are in the system, we have the support, we have the advocates, we have the organizations to assist you through that process.
Mm-hmm. And how long does this take? Because you mentioned a hearing, and there might be a custody hearing. There might be, different hearings that come up. It might depend on the calendar. How long, Judge, does something like this take? And by something, I mean you want to get away from your abuser. You have filed charges. Maybe you have children. Now, how long does that take until you are done?
So it depends. That's the short answer. A temporary restraining order, as she mentioned, they can happen the same day. They can be issued the same day. We have what's called an ex parte temporary order or temporary restraining order, which means that you can walk those through the same day, attach a verified affidavit to it, explaining out, the issues of what's going on, and the judge can sign the ex parte order the exact same day, right? But those temporary restraining orders, they last for up to 14 days. And you're able to get them extended once for an additional 14 days. And usually the hearing is set within. Well, here lies the problem. Everyone is not able to get that other party served within that 14-day period. So what do, right? You do have the option to do a protective order, right? You can do an ex parte protective order. You can walk that through the exact same way. It's still going to be one of those situations where it's going to be in place temporarily until you're able to get to court and have that hearing. And to your point about scheduling, that becomes an issue. And it's not necessarily that the court has to make time for those, but it just depends on the schedule too of the victim. It could depend on the schedule if the the respondent is served, they hire an attorney. We have to move these things around. And, it is not a situation where it takes an unlimited amount of time, right? But it's just so many things can happen within that time period. So you can get a temporary restraining order, ex parte, as I explained, you can get that issued the same day, and the next day something can happen. So it can move as quickly as possible. However, it does not put a person in a position where the violence does not necessarily occur to them just because this sheet of paper is in place. You have to be very careful if you're going to hire an attorney representing you on those orders, because if something is missing, they're not done properly, citation isn't done properly, you run into all kind of issues with that, and then the victim is left unprotected. So there are a lot of things that a lot of moving parts. That's why I said it just really depends.
Right. And an attorney will be appointed to you if you cannot afford one.
Well, in Texas, it doesn't necessarily work like that on the temporary restraining order or the protective order. A lot of people do them on their own, called pro se litigants. In Texas, we're only allowed to court appoint attorneys under special circumstances. Usually that's when it's involving someone being held in contempt, because those motions are quasi-criminal. So in addition to the civil element, there's a criminal element where they can be incarcerated. And by law, we have to court appoint at that time. But absent a finding of them potentially being held in contempt and a CPS case, usually people, if they're not represented by an attorney, they walk those through themselves.
All right. And that's Child Protective Services, right?
Yes.
I will end with this question. This is for the both of you. A lot of women, they don't believe that they will be believed. Generally, the abuser, or men too, right? A lot of men believe that they won't be believed, but the abuser is normally likable. The abuser is normally someone who, I wouldn't believe it. Oh my goodness. And so there's this sense of disbelief. When you get into a court as a prosecutor, as a judge, based upon your own experiences, what does someone show so that they will be believed, that makes it good facts for them, that makes it a good case for them, Marilyn? What do they need to do and bring in court to be believed and be a good advocate for themselves?
I mean, I think the authenticity of an individual is important. I think that the pattern in history is going to come into play. But I think, not being afraid and shameful about what is taking place and transpiring, right? Like, I think that's the importance of the victim witness advocates. I know that in Maryland, we have victim witness advocates in our specialty units that deal with survivors of domestic abuse and child abuse. These are very specialized sort of cases because of everything that you've just said. They've experienced a great deal of trauma. And so dealing with those types of individuals to make them be heard and to be seen. So often the abuse is a result of an individual that has made that survivor believe that they're not believable, as you've indicated. And so having to work with individuals that specialize in this work is critical, it's important. But I think the biggest sort of takeaway is that there's no sort of perfect timing. And when it comes to your safety, what we've seen from just this past week, right, is that you cannot just not do anything about it. And as I stated before, those threats and that pattern, they make a difference. And so reaching out immediately to law enforcement, and the courts, through the protective orders and domestic violence advocates, as we're just on the previous sort of segment, is critical.
And Judge, have you seen somebody come to your court and do something that did not put them in a better position because of maybe something they did or how they acted, where had they done it another way, it would have given them a better result?
Oh, absolutely. I think definitely getting out there for victims, being seen and being heard, those are key. And I think people forget sometimes when they're in a courtroom, the judge is also paying attention to your body language. The judge is paying attention to how you respond to things that are being said that you allegedly did. And if you are snappy with the judge, or if you're snappy with your attorney, opposing counsel, we're picking up on those things. So I will have to remember twofold, not only for the victim, and I'll say alleged victim, and the alleged assailant. And I'm saying there have been situations where people have come to court alleging domestic violence, and domestic violence did not occur. It's just one of those things where they want to get back at the other parent. They figure this is a way to one-up them in a custody battle. I've seen it all. So I just encourage people to be honest. The more transparent you can be, the more forthcoming you are, even about the bad facts, the things that look terrible for you, and to get those facts out. Don't wait until the other side brings those facts up and then you try to paint it with a brush, like, no, it was, it wasn't really like that. It was like this. You have to own whatever it is. Accountability is a big thing. And in court, sometimes I think people forget about the accountability component. We're looking for that as a judge, because usually the truth is somewhere in there. It's part of this story, it's part of this story, and it's lying somewhere in the middle. So I always encourage people to just be honest and be forthcoming.
All right, Judge Vonda Bailey and Marilyn Mosby, I want to thank you so much for all this important information and walking us through the legal system as to how it will really work if you find yourself in that situation. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
All right, absolutely. All right, you are watching the Black Star Network. Stay with us. We are going to have a little bit more after the break, so hang in there. We'll see you on the other side.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
What's up? It's Talib Kweli. I'm CEO. This is the Black Star Network.
All right, today is Earth Day, a time for us to focus on protecting our planet, but current policy shifts are threatening these efforts. A key example is the recent dismissal of the environmental investigation in Lowndes County, Alabama, and this follows Trump's executive order that prohibits federal agencies from pursuing diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Because of this, the DOJ Civil Rights Division has pivoted away from environmental justice that has a DEI framework to align with this new directive. So what actions can we take to protect our communities from environmental injustices? Joining us to discuss this is Dr. Beverly Wright, the Executive Director of the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice. Dr. Wright, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so listen, how can we ensure in our communities that this new order does not negatively affect what's going on in our communities? Our communities are already struggling when it comes to whether we have a refinery plant next to us or water issues. They are suffering, and we know this. We've seen the maps where the refinery plants are, for example. But what can we do now in order to fight against this?
Well, we have been in this situation before. You know, we're now working to maintain the progress that we've made over the last possibly 30 years. But we have been in a place for centuries where we have had no protection. So our work continues without money, and the work is the same. It is education, training, organizing, and voting to make certain that we stay in this game and we wait this particular terrible situation out. So one thing that happened for us under the Biden administration was that for the first time, we actually had money to do the work that we had been doing with no money. So we're back in the same situation with no money. The difference is that we're better organized, for one thing. We're more connected, and we are continuing the work with no money. It is really very important, for example, that we stay engaged politically and encourage our community to vote. Who you put in place matters. And I think we see that better now than what we've ever seen before, that voting actually matters and it can make a difference. So one of the things that we've done is just before the Biden administration came into place in 2018, we literally started what we call the environmental or a just climate platform. That's where community groups and environmental groups came together to try to pull together changes that we thought needed to be made in the Clean Water Act, for example, the Clean Air Act, all put in place, but we still have Cancer Alley. What does that mean? Yeah. It means that there's an act that in some way was protecting some people, but not others, but the whole game is not protecting the globe or the environment. So, and as usual, we are the people who suffer. So coming together to present what we thought should be corrective action was put in place and presented to the Biden administration. That resulted in $700 billion coming back to our communities for renewable energy and environmentally sustainable projects. We were on the move. The lesson that we've learned with this new administration is that we can never sit an election out. We have to become involved because who's in place makes a difference. Now, it's also, to me, it also encourages us to do more. I think we were, in any way we were getting really happy and a bit lazy about organizing and educating. This shows us that we cannot. So we have been re-energized to continue our work, and we know that our chance is coming again. So right now we're trying to get ready for this change to do what? To build back better. It's not good enough for us to put back in place what used to be there. We have to make the changes that are necessary so that we are no longer growing more cancer alleys, that we are protecting the health of people who look like me and poor people and the planet. And what we're also protecting, believe it or not, is our property. So imagine the number of Black communities that have been completely destroyed. The worth of their homestead is gone. And for most of us, that was transformative wealth. When you can inherit something, that's building wealth in your family. Imagine the communities where our parents and grandfathers, grandmothers worked so hard to buy that little paradise, as they called it, and then we lose it because of pollution, because of toxins that now devalue that property. So we're not just working for our health, we're also working for our pocketbooks and for the wealth of our children who come behind us.
Yeah, and speaking of pocketbooks, though, in terms of, let's say, grants that might not be awarded to certain communities because it's looked at as DEI, and monies that communities are no longer receiving because of the new disposition of this administration, what do you do in those situations in order to fill in the blanks?
Yes. So you're speaking to someone who lost 18 to $20 million in funding for communities with all of the work that we do. So what we do is really press on the philanthropic organizations to focus a lot of their funding in the direction of filling the gap. We also are working with them with legal organizations because we are in court. We're not giving up. We're not just relenting, to what Trump has done. What he's done is illegal, and we are in the fight. And we're not afraid because what else can he do to us besides what he has already done? So we are in the fight, and we are working diligently with the philanthropic world, trying to get them to put more money in places where Trump has removed all of our dollars. Workforce development, something that really supports our families and transforms them. He canceled a grant that was 30 years old that had an unbelievable track record. So what do we need? We need more dollars in workforce development and more monies to help us have our communities prepared for this transition to this renewable energy economy. We want an equitable renewable energy economy where we are actually involved in redirecting our resources for renewable energy. If we don't train our young people to be a part of this, then we're left out once again. So we're asking the philanthropic organizations to become involved in all of these areas where we've lost ground. We really believe that this is temporary. I just really believe that this will not last. And we're built from stronger stuff than what Trump can hand to us. We've been through a lot. We'll live through him. And we just keep encouraging one another to stay in this game. Work with young people, educate and train them so we can continue this work.
Brighter days are coming. We have about 30 seconds. I want to ask you this. What can people on an individual level do in their communities in order to deal with this environmental racism and injustices?
The first thing on my list is vote. I would have young people tell me voting makes no difference. I said, so all those people who died fighting the vote, my mother going down counting jelly beans and all of that, they were just stupid. So for every person who thought voting did not matter, look at where we are and tell me that again. It is very important for us to become a part of this democratic process. And there's a reason why people are trying to keep us out of this democratic process. We intend to be in, and also educate yourself as it relates to environmental issues. Don't just wait till it's flooding and say, oh my God, what happened? Become involved with your city council, with your state legislators, and visit your schools and make certain that our children are also being taught about the environment. Individually, we all need to do something. And I say, whatever you believe in, start praying to that and practicing what we need to do to make this a better world.
All right, Dr. White, thank you so much for being with us today and filling us in on this Earth Day, a very important day. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, that does it tonight for Roland Martin Unfiltered. I want to thank Roland for having me in his seat this week. I also want to thank my panel, Michael Brown and Robert Patillo. Now, your support is critical to what we do, and you can support us via Cash App using the Stripe code at the bottom left-hand corner. You can also help us with credit cards. Use the same thing. PayPal's R Martin Unfiltered, Venmo's RM Unfiltered, Zelle at RolandSMartin.com. And if you are old school, you can send checks. You can send money orders payable to Roland Martin Unfiltered, P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037. Stay with us. There's going to be more with Roland Martin during the week, of course. We're going to be continuing to talk about domestic violence. I will see you on Friday. Before we leave, I also want to have one more reminder, and that is the shopblacknetwork.com, where you're going to find the official Black Star Network swag and all kinds of Black-owned products. You can buy everything on shopblackstarnetwork.com. It is the way that we support a network of folks, a network of Black businesses to make sure that they stay in businesses. All right, we'll be back tomorrow. I will see you Friday.